Each week we have the privilege to read the Torah and read the Haftarah portion. Each week we glean messages that applies to our modern times. So I would like to share with you some interesting points in this parashat Vayakhel. There are basically 3 points. Number 1 is the concept and consequences of rebellion. Number 2, the idea of remorse, forgiveness, and rectification. And number 3, the idea of building, the construction for bringing God's godliness into a sanctuary and affecting the individual and community. So it's many points, but let us connect it together. So I'd like to start with the idea of rebellion. We read several weeks ago the story of Hur. The biblical Hur is the husband of Miriam, the famous biblical prophetess, brother-in-law of Moshe Rabbeinu. He was killed by a group of people who protested. The Hur, they tells us he tried to stop the rebellion of the people. At that time was the story of the Egel, the golden calf. So Hur basically died trying to uphold the law that just a few weeks ago in Parashat Yitro we read the laws that given in Mount Sinai, and his death was a great traumatic event, was tragic. Yet the Torah tells us in this parasha how his grandson Betzalel was chosen to rectify that rebellious act of some rebel rousers. So the Torah tells us that Vayas Betzalel, that he was given the exalted task to build the Mishkan, to build the tabernacle, the resting place for the Shekhinah, for the divine providence, to fix the mistake of those who went astray from Torah. One can only imagine the nachas, the joy that the grandfather Hur had in Shamayim, in heaven, seeing the wrong corrected, and that the community put back on track and make all this terrible avodah zarah, all this horrible idol worship was stopped. In other words, God does not miss this thing, and rewarded Betzalel, the grandson of the murderer Hur, with the honor of leading the building of the Mishkan, which we call in our language the Dor Vador, from one generation to the next, showing that good deed of parents, good deed of grandparents can be attributed and rewarded to the future generation. So what happened next? The Torah chapters talk about the donation of 3 things: gold, silver, and copper. So it made me think about this current event, the Winter Olympic in Sochi in Russia. We have there 3 categories, 3 categories of prizes. We have 3 weeks of international sport competition among 98 events in 15 winter sport from February 7th to the 23rd. The cost of building this Olympic park, the stadiums, the infrastructure roads, the power plants, according to Vladimir Putin, the Russian president, he said it's in a neighborhood of $14 billion. So a lot of donations from countries, a lot of donations from adversaries, from private donations, and the prizes were the gold, the silver, and the bronze medal. And also while building sportsmanship and a great Olympic event. But then we heard the next door. It was a rebellion nearby in Ukraine erupted, and I'm sure you have seen it in the news. You see that many people killed and serious trouble. And we all pray for the safety and return to peace, and we pray particularly to our brothers and sisters, the about 300,000 Jews living in Ukraine as well. Now let's go a little bit to the this week's Haftarah. We have in the Haftarah the description of construction of several components of the Beit HaMikdash, of the Holy Temple. It was a craftsman by name of Hiram. Paralleling to the Torah portion we read in the story of the tabernacle, King Solomon called for Hiram. It was an expert coopersmith and many other talented team members. And one of the structures, it was a calm. It was called Boaz, was one Yachil and one Boaz calm. And Boaz calm, again, it was in remember of the great-grandfather of King Solomon, which was the Boaz, a tribute to ancestors being honored generation later for their contributions to Jewish devotion and continuity. Additionally, as we learn about the Mishkan donation, we read how certain members jump right to help, and some with a lot of help, and others gave whether donation that they could afford. Yet, you read painfully how some of the wealthy ones could easily contributed, did not donate because they were lazy and waited for others to pick up the slack. Some call it like cheapskates, but by the time they woke up to the missed chance to do the great mitzvah with the money, their donation were no longer needed. The quota just had been made. So what happened next? Obviously it was a guilt. They regretted withholding their donations, and God was not happy with their donation and with their inaction. So he took out their names from the Torah as a punishment because they offered to give, which is called too little, too late. They show bad sportsmanship. So when the misers saw how their actions were viewed so negatively, they could have felt depressed and hopeless. After all, in the end, they lost out of being team players, able to give to the Mishkan, to the tabernacle and receive God's blessing. Yet, rather than reacting that way, they chose to go ahead, seek out what else there might be that they could donate. And then you read that the breastplate stones were added to the design to accommodate that, which called better late than never decision. Showing, as Yogi Bear once said, it ain't over till it's over. The Torah clearly demonstrates God's approval for the actions, and each one was given honor, and their donation was described at length. So we see, my friends, from this how a person should never give up hope, and that there can always be a way to correct mistake. Clearly, there is something very powerful about righting the wrong, and the Torah chose to make a point of it for all to see and to learn. This makes me think about a review of a book I read recently, and I glanced over that book while I was on the plane. The book called A German Life by Dr. Bernard Wolfschager. It's a board-certified family physician, married, with 3 children, living and practicing in Aventura in Florida. Tells his true non-fiction story of how he, as a Nazi's son, became a Jew. It is fascinating. He was also featured in the documentary called The Ghosts of the Third Reich. To make the long story short, Dr. Bernard grew up in Germany, and as a teenager learned that his father was a decorated World War II tank commander and Nazi officer, very close to Hitler, and he was sickened by his father's killing and choices. So Dr. Bernard traveled to Israel to see what the Jewish people were all about, fell in love with the land, with the people and the religion. He converted to Judaism, married an Israeli, served in the medical branch of the Israeli army, and he describes how he was rejected by his German parents and German relatives who were still full of anti-Semitic venom. The Dr. Bernard stresses his belief that, and I quote, individuals can change the world and by making choices can create a better life. He said, I am a perpetual optimist, believing that individuals can make a difference. So we see from all these examples, winning is important, and that the best team in the long run for true victory is to keep the Torah and God's commandment, and to be on God's side for ultimate gold, silver, and bronze medals. We are all described as God's children, as His builder. Al tikri banaych el abonaych in Hebrew. Each of us can choose to be an Olympic spiritual winner, representing the Master of the universe and building a better world. Shabbat Shalom.